My father kicked me out at 13 to please his pregnant wife. Years later, she abandoned him, and now he's back begging for help. But I reminded him he abandoned me first, and his entire family disowned him. I'm 20 years old, studying engineering at the University of Houston. And honestly, I still don't know if I did the right thing by refusing to help my father when he asked me a few months ago. But the thing is, he made his decision years ago when he kicked me out of his house in the middle of the pandemic, so I guess I have the right to make mine too. I need to tell this story because a lot of people have told me I'm being too harsh, that I should forgive, that at the end of the day, he's my father, but I don't know. I think when they hear everything that happened, they'll understand why I just can't. I mean, I don't want anything to do with him. My parents got divorced when I was like 7 years old. I don't remember much about it, honestly. Just that suddenly my mom, Sarah, it wasn't living with us anymore, and I started spending alternating weeks between the two houses. My mom is a surgeon. She works a ton. She's always worked a ton. And when the pandemic started in 2020, she was basically living at the hospital because you know how crazy everything got. I was 13 at the time, and my mom decided it was safer for me to stay with my dad, Michael, and his wife, Jennifer, because she was exposed to COVID every day at the hospital and didn't want to infect me. It seemed like the most logical thing, right? My dad worked from home. Jennifer did too. And they lived in a big house in the Houston suburbs with a huge yard, like the perfect place to spend a quarantine. At first, everything was fine. I mean, it was weird being locked inside all the time and not seeing my friends, but my dad and I played video games together. Jennifer cooked new things because she was bored, and it was basically like forced vacation. Jennifer was pregnant, like 3 months when all this started, and I was excited because I was going to have a little brother or sister. She and I weren't super close, but we got along okay. She'd been with my dad since I was 9, so I was already used to having her around. But then something changed. I don't know if it was pregnancy, hormones, or what, but like 4 months into her pregnancy, Jennifer started getting super weird with me. At first, it was small things, like she'd tell me I was making too much noise when I was playing video games in my room with headphones on, or she'd complain that I left dishes in the sink when literally everyone left dishes in the sink. Then she started making comments about my clothes, my hair, how I talked, basically everything I did bothered her. And my dad, he saw what was happening, but he'd always say something like, "Give her a break. She's pregnant. Hormones have her crazy. Just ignore her." But the thing is, I couldn't ignore her because we lived in the same house, and we were all locked down. There was nowhere to go. No escape. I started spending more time in my room, only coming out to eat or go to the bathroom, and even that became stressful because Jennifer always found something to complain about. One day I came down for breakfast and she saw me and literally made a disgusted face, like my presence physically offended her. And I was only 13 years old, I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. Why she suddenly hated me so much. My mental health went to shit, basically. I started having anxiety attacks, couldn't sleep well, lost like 10 pounds because I barely ate to avoid having to go downstairs and deal with Jennifer. The worst part was that my hair started falling out. Like whole chunks would stay in my hands when I showered, and when I told my dad, he just said it was normal, that it was pandemic stress, that we were all stressed. But I knew it wasn't normal. I knew something was very wrong, and nobody was listening to me. I tried talking to my mom on the phone, but she was working 18-hour days at the hospital and felt super guilty about not being able to have me with her. So I didn't want to worry her more. I told her everything was fine, that my dad was taking care of me, but inside I was destroyed. Looking back now, I should have been honest with her. I should have told her everything, but I was 13 and didn't know how to express what I was feeling. Then we get to the day that basically changed everything. It was July, unbearably hot outside, and we'd been locked in that house for like 4 months. I came down for breakfast and took out my favorite cereal. It was some Frosted Flakes that my dad had bought specifically for me because he knew I liked them. I poured myself a bowl, left the box on the table like we all always did, and went to my room to eat while watching YouTube videos. Like an hour later, I came down to put my bowl in the sink, and the cereal box was gone. I looked in the pantry, in the fridge. It wasn't anywhere. I asked Jennifer if she'd seen my cereal, and she, without even turning to look at me, said she'd thrown it in the trash because it took up too much space in the pantry, and I was like, "What? You threw away my food?" And she finally turned to look at me with that contemptuous face I already knew by heart, and said, "If you don't like how I run my kitchen, you can go somewhere else." Something in me broke in that moment. You know, after months of putting up with her comments, her faces, her constant hostility, I just exploded. I yelled at her that I was sick of her, that she was a bitch, that I didn't understand why she hated me so much when I hadn't done anything to her. Jennifer started screaming too, saying I was an ungrateful child, that she didn't owe me anything, that this was her house and her family. I told her my dad was my family too, that I had as much right to be there as she did. That's when my dad arrived. He probably heard the screaming from his office, and I asked him, "Dad, did you see what she did? She threw my food in the trash." And I expected him to defend me, to tell Jennifer she was crossing a line. But instead, he looked at me, then looked at Jennifer, who was crying and touching her belly like I was a threat to the baby, and he told me, "I think you need to calm down." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "I need to calm down? She throws away my food and I need to calm down?" And Jennifer started saying she couldn't deal with this, that the stress was bad for the baby, that I was a constant problem in her house. And there it is, see? Her house. Not our house. Her house. And my dad. Instead of correcting her, instead of reminding her, it was my house too, because it was my dad's house, just stood there, looking at me like I was the villain of the story. Then Jennifer said the words, "I'll never forget." She said, "Michael, he has to go. I can't keep doing this. It's him or me and the baby." And I froze, waiting for my dad to say no. That of course he wasn't going to kick me out, that I was his son and Jennifer was being irrational. But he didn't say anything for what felt like forever. He just stood there, and finally, he said quietly, "I think it's better if you go to your mom's." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I said, "What? Dad, Mom is working at the hospital. I can't go to her." And he said, "Then call someone else. But Jennifer's right. This isn't working." And I, with tears already running down my face, asked him, "Are you choosing me or her?" And he didn't even look at me when he said, "Don't make me choose." But he'd already chosen, right? The moment he didn't defend me, the moment he agreed with her, he'd already chosen. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I was in shock, I think. I went up to my room, grabbed my phone, and posted on Instagram and Snapchat what had happened, basically telling all my friends and family that my dad was kicking me out of the house to please his pregnant wife. I didn't do it to cause drama. I mean, yeah, maybe a little. But more than anything, I needed someone to know what was happening. I needed help and didn't know how else to ask for it. My dad gave me like 30 minutes to pack my things. 30 minutes. I started shoving clothes into a backpack. I didn't even know what to pack. I was crying so hard I could barely see. I tried calling my mom, but she didn't answer. She was in surgery or something. I called my Aunt Claire, my mom's sister, and told her everything between sobs. She told me she was coming right away, not to move, that everything was going to be okay. But I didn't want to be in that house one more minute. I texted a friend who lived like 3 blocks away, and he told me I could stay at his place as long as I needed. So I did something that was probably kind of dramatic, but in that moment seemed like the only option. I climbed out my bedroom window. I threw my backpack out first, then I got out and walked to my friend's house without looking back. My dad didn't even realize I'd left until like an hour later, when he went up in my room to see why I was so quiet. By that time, my Instagram and Snapchat story had exploded. My friends, cousins, aunts and uncles, literally my entire extended family was commenting and sharing, asking what the hell was going on. My Aunt Claire saw the posts in the car on the way to my dad's house and started calling all the family members, telling them what had happened. When she got to my dad's house and he told her I'd left, she basically screamed at him at the door, told him he was a shitty father. How dare he kick out his 13-year-old son in the middle of a pandemic, that my mom had trusted him with her son and he'd just thrown me out on the street. My dad's family, I mean my paternal grandparents and my uncles from that side, also found out through social media and started calling him, texting him, asking if it was true. And he, instead of admitting he'd screwed up, started defending himself, saying, I was a difficult teenager, that I'd been disrespectful to Jennifer, that he had to think about his new family. My grandparents, who'd taken care of me a lot when I was little and had always been really important to me, told him he was crazy, that no excuse justified what he'd done, that Jennifer was the adult in the situation and should act like one. My Aunt Claire finally found me at my friend's house and picked me up. She took me to her apartment in downtown Houston, and that's where I stayed. I blocked my dad and Jennifer on everything: phone, social media, everything. I didn't want to know anything about them, didn't want to hear their excuses or justifications. My mom was finally able to take a day off like a week later and came to see how I was. She felt horribly guilty. She cried and apologized to me over and over for sending me to my dad's, for not protecting me. I told her it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have known what was going to happen, but I know to this day she still feels responsible. I spent the rest of 2020 and all of 2021 living with my Aunt Claire. She worked from home in digital marketing and had the space and patience to deal with a traumatized teenager. I started therapy, which helped a ton, and little by little I started feeling like a normal human again. My hair stopped falling out. I gained back the weight I'd lost. I started sleeping well again. My mom saw me on weekends when she could, and I basically divided my time between the two of them. My dad tried to contact me several times during those first months. He'd send me really long emails because I had him blocked on the phone, telling me he regretted how things turned out, that he wanted to fix our relationship, that Jennifer wanted to apologize too. But I didn't respond. I didn't even read the full emails. I deleted them as soon as I saw they were from him. My grandparents also tried to be mediators. They'd tell me to give him a chance, that people make mistakes, but I wasn't ready. I didn't want to be. The thing is, over time I stopped being angry. You know what I mean? Like the anger transformed into indifference. I stopped thinking about my dad every day. I stopped waking up with that knot in my stomach, wondering why I wasn't enough for him. I just moved on with my life. I graduated high school, got into college, made new friends, basically built a life where he didn't exist. And honestly, I was okay with that. I was happy, or as happy as I could be considering everything. Fast forward to like 6 months ago, January 2025. I was in my sophomore year of college, living in an apartment with 2 roommates near campus, studying like crazy for my midterm exams. One night, my Aunt Claire called me and told me she needed to tell me something. From her tone of voice, I knew it was something serious. She told me that my dad and Jennifer had separated, that Jennifer had accused him of domestic violence and had gotten a restraining order against him, and that she'd kept the house, the car, basically everything. My first reaction was like, okay, and what does that have to do with me? But my aunt kept telling me. Turns out Jennifer had called the police one night saying my dad had pushed her during a fight, that she'd hit a table and was bleeding. The cops arrived, saw Jennifer with a bruise on her arm, and arrested my dad. He said it was a lie, that yes, they'd fought, but he never laid a hand on her, that she'd hit herself on purpose to frame him. But you know how these things are. The police always believe the woman in domestic violence cases, so they took him away. Jennifer didn't press charges in the end, but she did get the restraining order and basically kicked him out of the house. She told him he could pick up his things, but after that, she didn't want to see him again. And my dad, who'd been married to her for like 10 years, lost everything. The house was in both their names, but she got a judge to give her exclusive residence for her. And the kid, my half-brother who was already like 4 years old by that point, my dad, had to go live in a hotel because he had nowhere else to go. But wait, it gets better. My grandparents. Remember how they always tried to mediate between my dad and me? Well, when they found out about the separation, they called my dad expecting to give him support, because, at the end of the day, he was their son. But my dad told them he needed money to rent an apartment and pay lawyers, and they told him no, that they weren't going to give him a penny until he fixed things with me. They told him literally, "You kicked out your 13-year-old son for that woman, and now that she kicked you out, you want us to help you? No. First fix what you broke." My dad apparently got furious, told them they were being unfair, that he was going through the worst moment of his life and they were abandoning him. And my grandfather, who's the calmest man in the world, told him that he'd abandoned his son first, that he was reaping what he'd sown, and that until he apologized to me and tried to recover our relationship, he had no family to count on. And they basically disowned him. It wasn't an empty threat either. They stopped answering his calls, blocked him everywhere, like gave him the same ghosting I'd given him. So my dad was alone, no house, no wife, no family, no money, because his salary barely covered the hotel and food, and basically in the worst situation of his life. And after 5 years without talking to me, suddenly I get a message from a number I didn't have saved. The first thing I thought was it was spam, but something made me open it, and it was my dad. I don't know how he got my new number, because I'd changed phones since the last time we talked. The message was long, like 2 full screens of text. It started with, "Son, I know I have no right to ask you this." After everything that happened, and continued with basically the whole story of his separation from Jennifer, how she'd betrayed him, how he'd been left with nothing, how his own parents had abandoned, and, at the end, he asked me if I could help him, if I could talk to my grandparents, so they'd reconsider their decision, if I had a spare room where he could stay temporarily while he got back on his feet. I sat at my desk reading that message like 3 times, trying to process what I was reading. Was my dad really, after 5 years of silence, 5 years where I moved on with my life and built my own happiness without him, asking me to help him, to talk to the family he himself had disappointed, to basically rescue him from the consequences of his own actions? I called my Aunt Claire and read her the message. She sighed and told me the decision was mine, that nobody was going to judge me no matter what, I decided, but to think carefully about whether I was ready to have my dad back in my life. I asked her what she thought I should do, and she said something I'll never forget. She said, "When you needed help at 13, when you were losing your hair from stress and had nowhere to go, did he help you? When you had to choose between your mental well-being and his wife's comfort, what did he choose?" And I knew in that moment what my answer was. I responded to my dad. I told him I was sorry he was going through a difficult time, but that I couldn't help him. I told him that when I was 13 and needed him, he chose Jennifer over me, and now that Jennifer had left him, he couldn't just come back and expect me to pick him up. I told him I wasn't going to talk to my grandparents because they were right in their decision, that actions have consequences, and that this was the consequence of having abandoned me. I told him I wished him the best, but to please not contact me again. He tried calling me after that message, like 10 calls in a row, but I didn't answer any. He sent me more messages, some angry ones saying I was resentful and didn't understand how hard it was to be a parent. Others more pleading, saying he loved me and had made a mistake. I read them all but didn't respond to any. After like a week, I blocked him again, this time from this new number too. Some relatives who still talked to my dad contacted me afterward, asking if I could reconsider, that at the end of the day he was my father and family should support each other. But the thing is, he stopped being my father when he chose his wife over me at 13. You know what I mean? A father doesn't do that. A father doesn't abandon his child when things get difficult. And if Jennifer could manipulate him so easily to kick me out, then honestly he never loved me as much as I thought he did. My grandparents to this day maintain their position. They haven't talked to my dad, and when I asked them about it a month ago, they told me their decision is firm, that what he did to me was unforgivable, and until they see a real effort on his part to make amends, they're not going to give in. My mom says they feel guilty for not having intervened before, for having tried to be neutral when they saw what Jennifer was doing, and this is their way of trying to make up for it. I don't know what happened to my dad after I blocked him the second time. I guess he got an apartment somehow, or maybe he's still at the hotel. I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. I spent a lot of time in therapy, processing everything that happened, understanding that it wasn't my fault, that I was a child and he was the adult who made terrible decisions. I don't carry that guilt anymore. I don't wonder what I could have done differently. Sometimes I wonder if I should have given him a chance, if maybe I'm being too harsh. But then I remember that day in July 2020. I remember how I felt when he told me to leave. I remember the months of anxiety and stress I lived under his roof without him doing anything to protect me. And I know I made the right decision. He had 5 years to contact me, to really apologize, to try to rebuild our relationship before he needed something from me. But he only showed up when his life fell apart, when he had nobody else to turn to. My friends tell me I have impressive maturity for my age, that many in my situation would have given in and tried to rescue their father. But I think real maturity is knowing how to set boundaries, understanding that you don't owe someone anything just because you share blood. My real family is my mom, my Aunt Claire, my grandparents, the people who were there when I needed them most. I have good friends. I'm doing well in college. I have a life I built myself without my dad's help. My half-brother is like 5 years old now and I've never met him. He probably doesn't even know I exist. Maybe someday when he's older he can look me up if he wants to know my version of the story, but for now I'm just moving forward. Last week, one of my classmates asked me if I had a dad, and I told him no, that it was just my mom. And I realized that when I said it, I didn't feel anything. No pain or anger or sadness. It was just a fact. A part of my history that no longer has power over me. And I guess that's enough for now.